In Britain during the 1950s, the Leyland octopus was the king of the road and essential to commercial life. Life on the road was hard, but it was worthwhile. These former drivers are proud men.
We felt that, sat round this table, we did a good job in the early days.
They were waiting for you, weren't they?
That's right.
They were waiting for you. There's no way of getting to some of them places without a lorry, was there?
No.
There's no trains, nothing.
No.
So a lorry had to take it. And this is where you started finding back roads, going through places you shouldn't have gone, little villages and...
exactly, yes.
Going over bridges that you shouldn't have gone.
What you shouldn't have. I know, yeah.
Knocking telegraph wires down.
That's right, yes.
The standard of living that I reckon that we enjoy today has been brought about by the wagon.
This wagon is a Super Sentinel from 1924. It's steam-powered, so just like a railway locomotive, the engine is fired up with a paraffin-soaked rag. An hour and a half later, it's finally ready to go.
You start off, you put it in forward gear, handbrake off.
Open the regulator. Go on. Give it a bit more.
No, it's the flashing there on you.
No, you're all right. Go on.
The Super was an advanced machine, a ruthless attempt to give Sentinel control of the steam wagon industry and so win a bitter commercial war that had been raging for a generation. The first powered wagon, built in 1896, was more cart than truck. And, like most of 19th century industrial Britain, the Thornycroft No. 1 steam van burnt coal to get up steam to power its engine. At the turn of the century, Britain was enjoying a trade boom. Steam-powered wagons soon found a niche, spreading goods from the docks to the railheads and even into the cities. Trade was still expanding when, in 1905, this arrived, the Foden 5-ton, which could actually carry a payload of 7 tons. Because the engine was over the boiler, it was called an overtype. As is conventional today, it was steered by the front wheels, and it was powered through the rear wheels. Over 7,000 5-tons were sold, which established Foden as the first steam wagon giant. Then, in 1914, came the Sentinel standard. It was an undertype, which meant a vertical boiler with the engine underneath it. This layout allowed more payload space, but it was usually rejected as complex and unreliable. The Sentinel was reliable, and could move a 6-ton payload fast, perhaps too fast.
I started driving in 1922 when I was 14, and I've just been driving ever since. In the very early days, my speed limit with the steam wagon and trailer on solid tyres was 5 miles an hour. And I've had many convictions for travelling at 7.5 and 8 miles an hour.
In fact, during the early 1920s, 8 miles an hour was slow, and the heavy steam wagons struggled to stay in front of much lighter and speedier petrol-engined vans. Foden reacted in 1924 with the C-type, whose top speed of 25 miles an hour was achieved with a powerful engine and 3 cast steel gears.
Well, once we've got steam and we're ready to move off, then we have to put it into gear. And these are the gears here. We move this lever into 1 for the first gear, back here for the second gear, and then come into this one for the top gear for when you're ready to go off on the road. Well, having set the engine in gear, then we go to the reversing lever, and this is which is this lever here. And to going forward, you put it in the forward position. If you want to go backwards, you put it in the rear position. So if we say we're ready to go forward, then you've got to operate the regulator. You push it forward, and then the engine will move.
Steam wagon gears were not like car gears.
I would never try to change gear when it's actually moving. We normally stop the engine, then we change gear.
Foden had taken well-proven steam technology and improved it. Power was generated by an old agricultural-style compound engine.
The compound engine is one where the steam goes into the high-pressure cylinder and then it's exhausted into the low-pressure cylinder, in effect using the steam twice over. The steering is quite heavy. You need a fair bit of arm power to move it. The same, of course, applies to the brakes, the foot brakes, and you need fairly strong legs, especially when you're hurtling downhill and you've got to pull up 9.5 tons.
This actual Foden was bought by Fuller's Brewery of West London in 1928. A year Britain's thriving industrial workforce slaked their thirsts on about 6 billion pints of beer. Many large breweries ran steam wagons, and Sentinel's spacious undertype standards were a popular choice. Sentinel could not afford to lose such markets to Foden, and it didn't. Thanks to the Super, which finally gave Sentinel control of the vital steam wagon industry. This clever cocktail of tradition and invention mixed an efficient but heavy chain drive with lightweight leaf spring suspension and even electrics. Steam wagons were reaching their peak.
Well, I've always looked upon steam as effortless power. There's no fussing with it at all. It just goes along when you're stationary, and you just open the regulator gently. There's no clutch to slip in, and gears to grind or anything like that. You just open the regulator gradually, and it just moves up.
Amazingly, this actual Sentinel worked the Liverpool docks until the 1960s. Its drivers, John Meacock and Jimmy Doran, have not met for 30 years. But they are soon right back where they left off.
Now, I'll have a look at your phone, see how your coal is.
All right.
Oh, aye. Plenty of coal on there. Plenty on. Good fire.
Our main job was cattle food.
Cattle food, oh aye.
Used to cart all the
cattle
cereal off the dock for making cattle food. Then seed oil cake, bran,
groundnut cake,
pollards.
Good though it was, the Super Sentinel was an anachronism by the 1960s. It had been clear as early as 1930 that heavy, coal-fired steam wagons were inefficient at converting thermal energy into pulling power. There was another, much more efficient technology, diesel.
And there was a big drift to the diesel when it started, and they got all the snags out of them kind of thing. When we first got our diesel wagons in 1933, I used to go to London and back from Widnes with 15 tons on for 7 and 6pence.
Sentinel was undaunted by diesel and reacted with the S4. The press raved about its most satisfactory performance and manoeuvrability that is quite out of the ordinary. With a top speed of 50 miles an hour, the S4 was much faster than any diesel, but it was also heavier, and that was its problem. A 1930 government report had claimed steam wagons were a nuisance and a danger to the public. In 1933, any vehicle weighing over 4 tons, which included the S4, faced penal taxes. By the mid-30s, even Sentinel had to face the fact that, despite the S4, steam was dying. For generations, the Foden Works Brass Band has entertained the people of Sandbach, the small Cheshire town where Edwin Foden built his first steam wagon in 1901. Today, the band plays on, although it's no longer bankrolled by Foden, and Sandbach is a very different place. Throughout the age of steam, Foden was the only wagon builder in Sandbach. Then in 1930, when steam was dying, the Foden family began to tear itself apart. The old boss Edwin was long dead. His eldest son, Willie, had emigrated to Australia. Sam Twemlow, Edwin's favourite son-in-law, was dead. E.R., Edwin's second son, was still on the Foden board, but was in dispute with the chairman, Francis Poole, who was his brother-in-law, and with his stepmother, Edwin's second wife, Annie. E.R.'s surviving son, Peter, remembers this dispute.
My father's stepmother was a bit of a bee. She had a reputation of being difficult, to put it that way, and she was a bit of a... She owned a lot of the shares in Foden's in those days, a big shareholder, and she was a bit of a tyrant, I gather. It's a bit tough.
Under Annie Foden's influence, the chairman, Francis Poole, announced, "We honestly feel we should be better keeping to steam."
And my father said, look, we have to move from steam, because in those days steam lorries were the thing, and diesel lorries were just coming in. And my father wanted to change more rapidly than they did. And so there was it was a fallout amongst the family at the time. And he said, enough is enough, and he went. Simple as that.
But ER only went to the other end of Sandbach, where he set up a new company called ERF. Here, he and his descendants would manufacture diesel wagons, using the lessons they had learnt at Foden.
What have I learnt from the days of the Foden days? I suppose I've learnt not to employ too many of my relations, probably.
ERF relied on outside talent from the very beginning, when they called in a brilliant young designer.
They got Ernest Sherratt, who was a designer at the old Foden company, to join them. And then in a greenhouse in Sandbach, they drew out the first ERF. That was in April 1933. And by September, they produced the first vehicle.
The engine, gearbox and axles and the frame were all used by the industry in general, but put together in slightly different ways. First thing is the Gardner engine, which had been a well-proved engine. That was the obvious thing to go for. Next in line is the gearbox with the David Brown box. That was the answer there. The axles, Kirkstall 40 axles, they were also used by everyone in the country who were making vehicles. So they're the three major components, and marrying those together was the task, which was a very enjoyable one for me.
The sturdy, low-revving Gardner diesel was designed to power boats. But once inside the first ERF, it inspired a revolution in British wagons. Lightweight, but able to carry an 8-ton payload, this four-wheeler soon turned ERF into a major wagon builder. The third customer to receive one was the Sandbach family firm, Hackney's.
Lovely vehicle, and lovely to ride in. I used to go to, my husband used to go to Cambridge, and we used to go at 5, and he'd drop me off in Northampton, and then he'd pick me up. He went to Fison's at Harston with 6 cylinders from Murgatroyd's, and it's as nice as any today.
This hastily assembled wagon was so advanced that other manufacturers were forced to copy it. Even ERF's family rival and neighbour, Foden.
Now we see the engine being lowered into position from an overhead crane. This 6-cylinder diesel develops 102 brake horsepower at 1,700 revolutions. Now the gearbox and radiator. The engine and gearbox are mounted on the Foden 3-point suspension system, ensuring freedom from vibration.
The new generation of assembled diesel wagons triggered a new road transport boom.
And you just keep moving up and down the country. It may be Newcastle, Liverpool, Newcastle, Manchester. You know, things like that. Or Aberdeen down to Cornwall, pick up some China clay from St Atholl, around that area. Back up for Manchester, back up again to Glasgow. Picking a load up, say, Dundee at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When you get your instructions, the boat closes in Southampton the following day at about 5 o'clock in the evening. So what do? You've got to go through the night. You know, you've already done one through the night. You've got to go again through the night, right down to Southampton, to catch the boat. As a rule, we used to try and work it so we could pass through our own hometown, probably on the way up and down, at least maybe once a week, or you couldn't always do that. I've actually come in at about maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight. Just sneak quietly in, got the frying pan out, had a bit of a fry up, wash and shave, lie on the sofa, 2 hours maybe, get up, leave a note, been and gone, see you sometime. And they've never known I've been in.
Although this heavy traffic was diesel-powered, there were trace elements of the steam wagons. This 1920s test film shows the world's first rigid chassis eight-wheeler. Each wheel had 14 inches of independent movement. All 4 front wheels steered, creating a turning circle just twice as wide as the wagon was long. Sadly, the 8-wheeled steam wagon was a futile effort because it faced the same legal restriction on payload as a much cheaper 4-wheeler. But as road traffic expanded, thanks to diesel power, the law was altered to regulate payloads by axle weight, and a 4-axle 8-wheeler was allowed to carry 10 tons more than a 2-axle 4-wheeler. That's why, in the early 1930s, the London bus maker AEC put its powerful bus engine into the first diesel-powered, rigid chassis 8-wheeled wagon, the Mammoth Major. And the modern British wagon was born. But the most important asset passed on from steam to diesel was not technological. It was the attitude of the drivers. Slow, steady, and proudly independent.
We're going back to the very, very early days of our driving careers, which in my case was a late 40s, early 50s, when the speed limit for the lorries was only 20 miles an hour, which meant you could do Lancashire to Bristol, 186 miles, 11 hours, no more. Lancashire to Cambridge, 11 hours.
Well, when I was coming out of Bodmin in Moor, you know what it's like up there, I'm looking through the mirror there, and there's a tractor behind with hay on or something.
That's right.
Passed me.
And he was pulling away from me.
He passed me with a tractor, yeah. That's how, yeah.
There was no powered steering.
No.
Nothing. You had to
That's
have
why we're such strong lads, isn't it?
arms like a gorilla. That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
And then they used to say, oh, drivers are sat in cabs to get no exercise. You got more exercise than anybody.
The vehicles at the time...
Oh, they were.
The ultimate.
...did the job.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it.
Civilization as we know it today would grind suddenly to a halt. There's no two ways about that without road haulage.
Well, it would have done in the early days, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would have done even in the early days. No matter what period you're speaking of, without transport, you're finished.
Yeah.
You've got to have it.
The book Classic Trucks by Nicholas Faith is out now in most bookshops, priced $16.99.